Okay, Sekigahara. Oddly enough, a campaign named after a battle. In this case. Okay. By the way, it's, I don't know. Pretty dawn. I don't know if you can catch it, the colors here. But I decided I would, take my shot at this one at this point, in terms of reviewing. First off, I don't know if I said this in the intro. I picked this up at a local game shop. I had been avoiding this game because I didn't think it would be my type of game in a lot of ways. I thought it was going to be too much of a predetermined, that predetermination was going to fit too much into the way combat and whatnot was resolved. Kind of like diplomacy or I don't know what else. Damn, that stupid tactical system where you like just cancel out units. You know, it was some professor or another came up with it, and it got a lot of buzz back when I was first on BGG. And it was just like, where's the game to this? You know, it's just canceling things out. This did not quite fit those expectations. There's a fair amount of luck in it, but it's not, as I mentioned in the wrap, it's not exactly where I'd expect it. So in your normal war game, you have kind of luck that comes in that's just the fate of, no matter how much you prepare, the sum of the two sides' understanding of the situation is not enough to be able to tell who's going to win. This game violates that, right? If you knew what both people had, you would know who's going to win any given battle, like what they have in their hands and whatnot. If they want to, you know, they might choose not to expend resources. The battle might not be worth it for them. Think of Verdun type situation or whatever, where you're trying to bleed the enemy dry rather than, I don't know. I don't know why, because you couldn't really, both sides were trying their hardest to hold or get it. So anyway, but instead, where the real full uncertainty comes in is where the operational plans are being made. The things that drive your operational plans, which usually are pretty clear, this is where I define my strategy, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, and we're going to see how the dice allow me to. To take that under concern. Now, this designer made a point of like, I don't like games that, you know, it's completely luck, where, you know, essentially if you had perfect information over both players' capacities, you would know whether or not you're going to be able to win a battle. That he favors, right? And he designed the game for that. But he didn't design it so that like the strategic would be that way, and rather instead you have a vast amount of like fluctuation in terms of what your strategic options really are. And when I first started playing, I looked and I had none on either side. Nobody had anything they really wanted to do. But as the game progressed, as I got to mold my hand and have it match the blocks on the board, I was able to get to a point where I might know what I'm going into the next turn with to some extent. But there would be a lot of variance to that, and it might change my strategic outlook simply because of this luck I'm getting that isn't well defined, right? Some of it's supposed to be kind of loyalties and whatnot, but some of it feels more like mindset of the commander, right? So you absolutely might know that you can win a battle just because you have the right cards for it. But you might not know if you can possibly conduct the strategic objectives that you've had planned before, because that is going to be randomized. Now, that you might know you can win a battle works fine if you're only fighting one battle, but if you're fighting more than one battle in a given turn, you're going to lose some cards for one battle, and you might gain some that help you that you weren't counting on for another battle. So there's some possibility of like taking a risk on a battle and hoping you get some additional cards and whatever. But it's all very strange. Again, it is completely setting what a war game is in general on its head, in the sense that instead of conflict and the actual battle, the test of battle being the unknown, the fully unknown situation, instead it's, well, what will I be able to do in terms of, what are attractive things to bring to bear in any given operation, in any given period of my operational planning? And that's just so different. Like normally you make your forced decisions and you know what you're going to do. And there's sort of a hand-wavy argument that's put forward by the designer. By the way, the designer's notes are fantastic. They may not have caught everything that I needed to know to go in terms of understanding the game, but they explained a lot of his decision-making in such a wonderful way. I really think they're the best part of the game, to tell you the truth. The historical probably comes second. The box third. Anyway, I don't dislike the game. It's setting all those preconceptions about what a war game is on their head. And I guess this maybe is why it's popular, is because it's just veering so far off to a degree. To some extent, you could argue that Maria and Friedrich are similar types of games, where, again, you're operating off this hand of cards that tells you kind of where you can move, where you can fight, what you can do. It's very much in that same genre. That one has a supply system which saves it and makes me think that it actually is a simulation. This one, I think the argument is that those strategic and operational decisions you're making are based on loyalty and perceived loyalty. Well, it is really, I don't know what it is, but the capability of being able to move these other clans and make them do what you want. Now, what's really kind of fucked up about that is that Tokugawa is the leader of the Tokugawa clan. You're going to tell me that he has iffy conditions of loyalty? You could also argue that some of its supply capabilities and stuff like that, he doesn't go into that side of things. But again, I feel like I should have some control over that, right? I'm perfectly willing to take what he's not willing to take, which is we walk into a battle and we roll a die or dice, and that's, it's possible things could go extremely wrong, although there might be limits to that, like in a traditional CRT. The limits are much less in like a buckets of dice game. In this, you probably have a pretty fucking good idea of what you can do to the enemy, and you might know what he can do to you. There are some little twists there. Treachery cards, whatever. You don't know what, he's got, but you're probably counting on him having as much, having a decent force. But his movements and what he's done kind of communicate to you whether or not that force is a capable force or if it's just a giant paper tiger. That's kind of where you're at in the battlefield. And there's bluffing in there and everything possible. Obviously not so much of that when I'm playing solo, although I throw dice when there is, so. But yeah, he is absolutely unwilling to accept that there's randomness in battle that nobody controls. You know, there could be a thunderstorm and it calls the whole battle off. You know, I mean, this is stuff neither player can plan for, right? And on the other hand, is absolutely willing to create a system in which the operational and more strategic decisions are almost entirely, like, yeah, it's wrong, but are heavily influenced by the cards you draw. And at the beginning of the game, that could be a huge deal, which was kind of hard to approach because I was left with so much fucking frustration because I couldn't figure out a thing that was worth doing for either player right off the bat. Anyway, let's talk about components because this is probably where the game shines the most. Like I said, GMT armored box. Okay, cool. The board is kind of beautiful and difficult to, it creates difficulties functionally. In conjunction with the fucking huge blocks. Big blocks in piles on a point-to-point system with information clustered around the points that gets hidden by the blocks, with pieces that get hidden behind the blocks. This is just problematic. Would this work with counters? Probably it would, and it's very, very pretty. But the blocks are the big curse in this game, and they're just going to cause problems. They're clumsy and clunky, they fall over, people get to see things that maybe they shouldn't because, you know, the design is intended to be a certain way. But worst of all, they hide information both on the board and of other player pieces that you need, of other informational pieces that you need to see. It causes great difficulty. Also, a lack of, so these resource places have little cubes that you put on the board if you control them. I think it would work better if they had little cubes that were all on the board of one color. This might actually work. I don't know if there's enough. So there's a set of, this might be a better solution for me. There's a set of an unknown number of cubes. Okay. It doesn't list here. Well, maybe it does. Here we go. Here we go. Yes. 10 small cubes of each color. So if there's less than 10 resource places, or 10 or less resource places and 10 or less castles, I would put the cubes out on the board to begin with and castles are always controlled by somebody. I would put the cubes out on the board for the resource centers to begin with and give them to players as a count of the amount of resource centers they have. Likewise, I would use the cubes for the other set of cubes for the castles to indicate how many castles you have. Instead, 20 cubes instead of, say, 10 or whatever, are used for, and I bet you there's 10 resource centers, or, well, 9 or less. 18 of the cubes are dedicated to just the resource centers, which means none of them are being used for the castles. Each player has their own set of colors, and they put them on the board, and they get hidden by the blocks. Something with no blocks in it. So something with blocks in it will automatically have its cube in a player's hand by the way I'm describing it. Whereas something that has a cube on the board will have no blocks on it, so it'll be relatively visible. It can still be hidden because some of these locations are kind of crowded together. I'm trying to see. I think this is kind of the worst area. Some of the locations are kind of crowded together, and you've got a lot of blocks showing up in these because of reinforcements and whatnot. And starting location, there's a whole bunch here. So a whole bunch of blocks end up clustered in a tight little area, whereas there's areas of the map where nothing essentially is going on, as mountainous regions in Japan and whatnot, where nobody moves on the point-to-point system. And it's kind of like, gosh, a lot of the board's wasted and a lot of the board is just cluttered with blocks where, the space between here and here is about the size of a block. So if I've got and I had, maybe a dozen blocks in this space at one time, or close to that. If I've got something like that and blocks over here, they're going to kind of melt together. And it's just not cool. It's not cool. Stacks of counters would work much, much better. Anyway, that is one of my biggest complaints about this game, is that it's not unplayable because of it, but it's a huge hindrance. The cards, these are, I think GMT's gone to a less armored card. Since this is kind of a top-rate game for them, or whatever, these have a little bit more give. They're not the fully unshuffleable ones, but they're still pretty bad. The only other thing, God, I'm feeling sick, that really is a component of play is the reference card, which seems pretty damn useful. It doesn't have a couple of key pieces of information in it that I felt like I had to look up more than some of the stuff that's on here. For example, what are the things that count as leadership? But for the most part, it's not a complex game. So anything that's missing isn't that big a deal. And the rules were decent. I don't feel like I had any real questions with the rules except for, hey, what am I doing? It was more the strategy that really kind of stymied me, especially at the beginning when I had no hand of stuff. And anything else? These little bags, they feel yucky, but they're very, very sturdy, and that is probably more important than how they feel. You don't draw out of them very often. Let me look at the different rules. So the sequence of play, you have to get rid of, at the beginning of each turn, except the first, you have to get rid of half your hand. It would really be actually helpful if you did get some discard capability at the beginning of your first turn, because you could kind of direct your hand to be something. And then you get 5 cards plus a bonus for castles. This is a nice mechanism. It allows you to trim your hand of garbage. There are a lot of chances you're going to have to do that, but when you go into combat, you don't really want garbage in your hand. And of course, you might get more garbage, you might get stuff that shifts which direction you're going, and you must discard half your cards. So if you're trying to build up to something, it might be hard to do so in some cases. You also get blocks added to your recruitment pool. I found that it was very, very hard to justify recruiting units, and we'll see why when we get to the movement side of things. Because taking a recruitment cost a lot, and generally put a unit somewhere where it wasn't very effective to you. It wasn't very useful. Just because these are the recruitment locations, and each clan has like one, and they're probably moving their forces out of it to do stuff, and then you start like, oh, I could take a piece back there at a cost to me of something I want to do, or of a card. I don't know, I don't think that's worth it, you know? That was kind of my feeling for the most part, was that actually recruiting troops wasn't all that worthwhile, and that I ended up collecting a lot in the reinforcement box because of that. But I'm okay with that. Certainly, it's an advantage to the person defending an area. So the Ishida, have an important location. This wins the game if you can take this out. They have a bunch of clans here. This is to help drive the historical situation more. By the way, my game ended due to me making what was kind of a noob's mistake, but I gotta say, I knew I was risking it, and I knew I was taking a chance that way at the time that I made the decisions that put me in that position. But yeah, I basically committed Ishida himself into a dangerous and risky position in which he was able to be wiped out. But otherwise, it probably should, there's a good chance that the game is going to follow a historical bent because the Tokugawa they have some advantages, as it were. And so they're likely to be able to push across Japan, and then, well, the one island. I don't know. It's in the Honshu, but no, I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking. My brain's not working. But push forward and end up, in that sort of more richly defended area where the Ishida have the chance to build up their defenses, and then it probably comes down to a climactic battle or so in which something might get exposed because both players have a leader who they can't lose, who will lose the game. But the Ishida have another thing. They have this. They can't lose that. However you want to take this. Okay. Then you have a bid for who goes first in the turn. And this is kind of weird. Again, this is one of the baked-in advantages the Tokugawa have, which is that their cards are worth more than the Ishida cards. Each player picks a card, presumably something they don't want to play that turn, reveal it, and whichever card has the higher value down in this corner gets the initiative and gets to choose who goes first. In general, I did not see much advantage to going first. You usually want to go second, I think, so that you can be more reactive. Although on the last turn of the game, there was a good argument for going first with the Tokugawa, winning the initiative and going first. But I kind of randomly decided against that because I wasn't certain that I wanted to engage, to press for the kind of automatic victory against this leader. I ended up doing it anyway, without having chosen for it before. So, I don't know. Whatever happens there. So this is one of the baked-in advantages of the Tokugawa. If they play the same kind of card, they're going to get the initiative. But you have the possibility of playing a better card. So cards, there's different kinds of cards in the game for the most part. There are, and they're all valued similarly. There's ones that have a single symbol on each corner, and those guys, and nothing else, and those guys are going to be worth 1 point. There are guys who have a sword that are going to be worth 3 points. These are the loyalty or disloyalty cards. They're worth, they're worth 7, but add 1 for the Tokugawa. And then there are the double cards, which have 2 on each corner, and they're worth 5 or 6. What that means is that you could commit a card that has more worth in the game overall, but it might not be that important to you in order to get a higher bid. Now, I think the loyalty cards are really, really unlikely, but if you really need to go first or second, you probably only really need to go first. You pick one of you might pick one of those and throw that away for your bid, so that you get the initiative. Then there's two sets of turns, A and B, where it's an I go, you go for each one, where they're kind of sub-turns or whatever. First player moves, then combats, second player moves, then combats, then go to the turn B. Now, in order to make an action in your turn, you have to pay with, well, in order to take any actions, you have the option to pay cards. But you get to move a stack for nothing or throw all your cards away. And that's quite often the most economical thing, because you want to hold your cards. You want to keep building up your card pool, and you want to keep refining it to be as good as it can be. Now, if you have a shitty card, it might be worth paying a card. And for paying a card, you get to move 3 different stacks of units. Now, for one of your moves, you're allowed to muster a unit. So if you only got a 1-stack move, you're like, yeah, I really need that. I really need to move this piece, and nothing else seems all that important, so I'm not going to spend a card, or this pile of pieces. I'm not going to spend a card, but now I don't get a muster. If you throw all your cards, you don't get a muster. If you have nothing to do, you could take a muster for 0 cards. The 3-stack move for 1 piece, for 1 pip, yeah, probably you only need to move 2 stacks and you could take a muster, but maybe moving another stack might actually give you some advantage. And then if you want to throw 2 cards, you get to move all your stacks. This allows you to really kind of gather your forces. But for movement itself, big stacks of units move slower, which makes sense. There are also certain things that affect your movement allowance. Your base movement allowance is 1, but by being in certain locations or having a leader or traveling only along the highway, you get an extra movement point. So you might be able to move faster, or you might be able to move a bigger stack of units, because a big stack of units, like let's say you have 6 units, you get 1 base movement, it loses a movement for being over 4, so you can't move that piece. The system has a nice, simple rule for preventing you from so when you activate a stack of blocks, you can move all those blocks in kind of any direction, but none of them can go over the same pathway as other blocks have gone over. Which means if I have a set of 6 units, I can send 4 in one direction, but I can't send the other 2 in that same direction as a separate unit. But I can split it off and spread around and kind of forage or whatever more effectively. It's a really nice design. Very, very, handles everything there with sort of a minimal rule. The combat itself is going to be based on matching your blocks to your cards and matching the blocks that you've already played with other blocks together. It has sort of a Knizia feel to it, right? So you get to commit blocks that you have cards for, and each time you commit the same clan, it gets to count everything of that clan before. And same with specials. They work in a similar sort of way where they get to count multiple times if you're able to bring them together. So what you want to do is have kind of a homogeneous set of blocks with the cards to back them up and bring them in. And that'll give you a really, really potent force. And that's why I say, look, if you didn't draw the right cards for the initial setup, there's not a lot you can do. And then you start tinkering your hand. And this is what wasn't clear to me, was I'm used to, hey, let's dive in and start playing, and I can see what I want to do. I want to move my pieces. I want to, consolidate my force and everything. None of that was absolutely clear until sort of that first light bulb went off of, okay, you can get yourself through paring your hand down and manipulating it a little bit very quickly to be able to do things. But those first couple turns were so frustrating. I could easily have seen someone who's not as stubborn giving up on the game based on those alone. Um, the actual combat is handled by points that you generate from activating those cubes in battle, or those blocks in battle. And basically, again, a set of blocks generates more impact. A set of blocks of a certain clan generates more impact as long as you can keep activating of that clan. And some multiple, it's 7, of units, of points, of impact points, it causes casualties. The person who wins the battle is the person who has the most impact. They generate an additional casualty on the enemy, but otherwise you're trying to generate casualties through getting your impact up higher. You probably want to win battles. You may or may not want to win heavily in battles. But every card you spend in battle, you get replaced. So it's not like, there are some games where you have a handful of cards, and that's, think of Maria or whatever. You have a handful of cards, that's what you have to play with, and all your fights are going to be based on that. Instead, you know that you will get a new wash of cards if you expend a lot. In addition, losing pieces, honorable death and everything, generates, and also, enmities that are gained through that, generates you more cards. It gives you more power for movement in later turns, for manipulating your hand during discards, but most importantly for that next battle that you have to face right away. But that becomes really random. So you can prep really well for one battle, but not know what's going to happen in the next. And you want to hit with your best prepped battle because you might have a guaranteed victory in that, but be relying on, I better draw something decent because I don't know if I can face the enemy with this other one. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. And as a game, it's got this sort of innovative system, very innovative system, I think. As with Maria and Friedrich, I'm not really, there's almost a recoiling because the innovation is such that it violates sort of preconceptions about what a war game, where a war game tolerates its randomness and where it doesn't. I feel like this is a little bit less effective at it. Although the randomizing of cards between battles makes up for that somewhat. That first battle, absolutely knowing that you can win that battle just based on the cards you have. Not because of the size of your force or whatever, the cards you have to back that force. And if you had the wrong cards, you would lose that battle. Your troops would just dissipate. They wouldn't even fight, essentially. Some of that feels less believable to me. I'm less sold on the arguments for this in terms of a historical type situation. The worst thing about the game, honestly, is because I think it's an interesting, at the very least, there's an interesting abstract combat-y type game here. Okay? There definitely is that. And it definitely has some links to the historicity. Reading the designer's notes, I felt like he was claiming stuff that made, by explaining what he did, that made it sound like it has a stronger claim than, say, Maria or Friedrich. I'm not so sure now. I feel very on the fence about that. And I feel like it's definitely less historically accurate and realistic and believable in certain ways. Part of it was he kind of put the commander should have, this kind of knowledge and whatnot. Yeah, but I don't believe that he really matched the sort of requirements that he almost set up in his designer's notes. Once I started playing it, I started feeling like, yeah, I'm not buying it. Because that strategic and operational decision making starts becoming randomized in a way that doesn't feel right, but maybe there's some hand wavy arguments for what's going on behind the scenes that causes that. Fine. But again, I'm just not convinced at this point. So the worst thing about it is the fucking blocks eating up, visibility and whatnot. And the symbols that were used, pretty as they are, accurate as they are, for the various clans, hard to discern, hard to distinguish between each other from my poor old eyes. In some cases they're easy enough. Anyway, that's my view on this. God, my throat hurts. I would be willing to play this opposed. I don't think I'm excited about playing it solo again, but who knows? I think I've pulled Maria out and played it again and probably had the same kind of feelings about that in terms of not wanting to play it solo. I think I did it because I was trying to get, I thought I had a 3-player game set up and ended up not having it. So, yeah, I was familiarizing myself with the rules. So, if I ended up getting somebody who wanted to play this in particular, I would certainly play it again so that I could better explain it and whatnot. All right, let's send this up. Totally not matching the nature of the review and whatever, but I just wanted to tag this on as an afterthought. I don't have a place to put it. I rearranged all my boxes some while ago, and I even left some spaces in play. There's a little bit of space there. There was a big space there where it's sitting right now, but it really belongs down there, next to Samurai and Ran and whatnot. And that would involve shifting a bunch of boxes over to move that space from up there to down there. I don't know why I have that big space there. Kind of weird. And then I have these Napoleonics that I haven't quite figured out what to do with, because they would involve shifting everything over, and I didn't want to do that either. But that was a decision back when I did that. I think I picked this up after I did the big reorg. Oh well.